Hello, everyone. You're listening to the Writing Docs podcast, where we discuss how businesses can help their teams to become better and more confident writers.
And we'll reveal the writing secrets that college forgot to teach you.
In this episode, we discuss concision and focus in writing. Also, we reveal how to get to the point in your communications, how to find your point, and how to write better emails, reports, and presentations. Excited to have Joel Schwartzberg on our podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Joel.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Joel was the Senior Director of Strategic and Executive Communications for the ASPCA from 2013 to 2024, and he is now focusing on writing, speaking at conferences and corporate trainings, and training others to master public speaking. His work has been published in the Harvard Business Review, Newsweek, Toastmasters, Inc.com, CNBC, and the New York Times Magazine, just to name a few. He is also the author of the bestseller, Get to the Point, Sharpen Your Message and Make Your Words Matter, and most recently, The Language of Leadership, How to Engage and Inspire Your Team. Today, we're talking with Joel about point making, how to talk to our target audiences, and how to give strong presentations that actually achieve the presenter's goals. Joel, let's first start with point making, because one of the concepts that you talk about is that some things should be considered points and some things are not points. So first of all, what is a point?
I'm so glad you asked that, Elizabeth, because if nothing else, I want people to realize that if you don't have a point, you're rendered pointless. Now, we're comfortable with this word point. We've heard, hey, get to the point, and what was your point? And that speaker had no point. What's the point of all this? So we've thrown that word a lot, but I find that we haven't explored it. I've been teaching public speaking since about 2006, and 3 years in, I had speakers who knew how to gesture, who knew how to walk, knew about eye contact. And yet, when I asked them what their point was, they would give me something that was not a point. That was a topic, a theme, a category, a catchphrase, an observation, a notion, a description. And what's so vital to understand is that when you don't have a point, you're not making an argument. So, to answer your question, Elizabeth, a point is a proposition or a recommendation or a suggestion, basically saying, if we do this, then that will result. And my contention is that when you make points in your writing and your speaking, that's when you have the maximum impact on your audience. That's when you get them to do what your goal is to have them do.
I'd like to ask the question of, and this is just playing devil's advocate here, okay?
Please.
Why is it important for us as the presenter or the speaker to identify the point? I mean, can't we just let the audience decide for themselves as they listen to what we have to say? Why do we have to sell a point rather than share
Right.
information?
Well, first, whose job is it to make sure the point gets through? Is it your audience's job? Or let's put it in a sales context. Is it your client's job to understand the value of what you're saying? Nobody
point.
would say that. And something I like to say is that it makes some people uncomfortable, writers in particular, but we're all in sales because we don't want to just share a point, throw something out there general and hope for the best. My audience will find something of value here, maybe by magic. No, we want to be able to clarify our point and really raise the chances that that point will be received by our audience. And at the end of the day, and I think we'll get into this, it's not about what you say or what you write. It's about what they receive. If your audience or reader doesn't receive the point you're trying to convey, then that's a failure on your part as the writer, as the communicator. So I think it's vitally important that you establish the point you want to make and the point you want them to receive. That's your job. Because if they receive another point, it might not be the point of value. And one word that we often use to replace point is takeaway. And we understand the value of a takeaway. So I often say when you write something or when you say something, you have to identify what is the takeaway? What's the one thing, not 5 things, not 10 things, not even 3 things. What's the one thing I want my readership and my audience to take away? Aha. Now let me reverse engineer my presentation, my writing, to make sure that they receive it.
I like
You know,
that.
you said something, Joel, where you said, "Is my audience supposed to get it by magic?" And I think there's sort of this uh, myth that writing, that presenting, that speaking well is magic. And people go, "Oh, I'm not a good speaker. Oh, I'm not a good writer."
Right.
But this writing is not in the realm of David Copperfield or Chris Angel. I don't know if they're relevant anymore or not. Uh, but it's not poof, right? It's not a Houdini. Okay, everyone knows who Houdini is, I think. There are certain strategies we can do to become better speakers, to become better writers, to make our presentations and documents actually achieve what we want them to. And no talent, no magic is required for that. I think that's very, very important.
Right.
And
And I often say that certainly in presenting and to large degree in writing, it is a skill and not a talent. And
and
that opens the door to training, to learning, to elevation, whether we're using AI or not. There are ways we can, maybe we'll get into that, but
Don't
there
even get her started on
well, here's when I started. All right. Let's stick with internally. There are ways we learn everything, right? So there are also ways we can learn to increase the impact we have on the audience. And just to put some mustard on the biggest way for me is to understand, to identify your point, to know how to sharpen it, and to have the skills to champion it.
Well, that actually, and you kind of touched on this, but let's say Elizabeth or I are about to give a presentation or putting something together. How do we know what our point is? Or does that indicate, if we don't, that we need to kind of go back to the drawing board?
Right. Now, I can say all day that a point is a proposition, it's not a description. So we have a vague idea. But when I wrote Get to the Point, I wanted basically a litmus test. You plop in what you think is your point here. On the other end, you get a green light or a red light. And it's really a two-part test. The first part of the test is called the I believe that test. Very simple. It goes like this. You take what you consider your point, let's call it an elevator pitch, let's call it a thesis as we knew it in high school. But what do you think is the one thing you want your audience to take away? Now, it's going to be one sentence. And here's the test: put the words I believe that in front of it. And with a minimum of tweaking or none at all, ask yourself this: do I now have a complete sentence? Would it impress my fourth grade language arts teacher as a complete sentence and not a run on and not a fragment? If you do have a complete sentence, then you're on your way to making a point. So let's put this to the test. Is I believe that podcasting a complete sentence?
no,
No. I believe that the power of podcasting. I believe that the evolution of podcasting. I believe that the
Mhm.
importance of podcasting. I believe that writing. I believe that successful creative writing. See how none of these are complete sentences?
I
So
think
it
so.
forces us to say, I believe that podcasting is our best tool for reaching our millennial audience.
Mm.
That is a complete sentence. And you can tell just by the sound of it, you want to say, go on. I want to
Mhm.
hear more about this value that you've identified that could help me reach this goal of reaching our millennial audience. So that's the first part of the test. If it's not a complete sentence, go back, rearrange it so that it is. Very simple. The second test is called the XY test, and this one's even easier. Basically, it says follow this template. If we do X, Y will result. If we do X, Y will result. So if I add more dialogue to my novel, it will be more compelling. X is the means, more dialogue. Y is the impact, more compelling. Now, an X without a Y is I believe that I should add more dialogue. Okay, but why? What's the
Mm.
result? A Y without the X is I believe I should make my story more compelling. Genius. Ha. So you need both the means, the X, and the impact, the Y. If you have both, magically, maybe it'll form a complete sentence, but more importantly, it will be in the form of a true point.
Well, and I think a lot of our listeners can appreciate having having a litmus test, having a template, having a formula, if you will. I know that always, and I do different kinds of writing, and I have sort of a formula for how I go about the different kinds of writing. I have a formula for putting together presentations. It helps organize our brains, I think, to where we don't get intimidated by the process. We have a starting point, and we know once we have that starting point, it's going to get us where we need to go.
Right.
L- Let me
I
ask
think
you.
it's just to be clear, it's a starting point, absolutely, but it's also a central point. When I wrote op-eds and editorials and speeches, it starts with what is the argument you're trying to make? What do you believe should happen, and what is the mechanism by which that can happen? And that is such a tremendous support system when you're writing, because then you know that everything I write from here on out, from the lead to the conclusion, really has to reinforce or support that point.
It
Well,
almost.
Joel, oh, sorry, Sarah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so everything has to hang off of that hook that you put in, and that's because
Ideally, or support it in some way, or set it up.
Are these tools
Do you put them on the side for yourself as the writer and as the speaker, or do you actually integrate that into your presentation and into your document somewhere?
I think it's part of the conception, part of the origin story of your point, whether it's an article in Fast Company, whether it's a book, whether it's a story. And by the way, fiction stories also have points. It's about what does my protagonist want to do, and what challenge do they face in doing it? So some people think this doesn't apply to fiction. It actually does. If someone asks you, "What is your book about?" You don't want to spend 2 hours. Well, this guy was born, and then he had a sister. No, it's about someone who's facing this challenge toward reaching this goal. But anyway, to your question, Elizabeth, I find it's in the conception, but it's also helpful throughout. If you're reading it or having it read back to you, artificially or otherwise, you want to be thinking, am I making my point? Now, I'm glad you asked this also, because I'm not suggesting that the words, I believe that, have to be part of your point. It's a test to make sure you have a point. Now, there is value to saying, I believe that. You're putting your credibility, your reputation on the line. Aristotle, that's about ethos, that's about your reputation, your credibility. So that helps, but you do not necessarily need to say, I believe that. In fact, if you take those three words out, you should have your point. I want to talk to you today about how podcasting is an avenue through which we're going to reach our millennial audience.
Speaking of Aristotle, and his rhetorical triangle, isn't he the one who said everything we do is persuasive? All discourse is persuasive. I believe he was, but let me ask you if you think that every communication, even internal documents and emails and reports, is persuasive, is selling a point. Does that apply to everything?
Ideally, yes. Someone once challenged me at a conference and said, well, all I'm doing is introducing the speaker. So I don't really have a point. It's really about the speaker's point. No, your point is to explain to the audience why we picked that speaker, what they will get from the speaker, what is the value of that speaker's point. I have never found an occasion, whether it's an email, uh, a chart, a white paper, anything really, that where at least a point couldn't elevate the compellingness and the value of that communication. Because ultimately, if you're communicating to me, hopefully you have a point. You want me to receive something. You want me to do something. You want me to think anew. Otherwise, why would you be communicating with me? Now, you can be communicating to entertain. You can be a comedian. You can be a singer. But I would suggest this. When we think about our favorite comedians, often they're the ones who make a point through the use of humor,
Mm.
not just telling us, knock knock jokes, although some do. I find that the best comedians are actually making a point through humor. So I welcome anyone who challenges me to think that their role as a communicator doesn't require or can't benefit from making a point.
I like that, and I think that really gives us pause to think about when we speak and why we speak
Right.
and what we say, and I think a lot of people could really benefit from pausing for a moment to think about what's the point I'm trying to make? What's gonna be an effective point. Now, effective is kind of this buzzword in business and everything like that. So let's define what an effective point when you say making an effective point in documents and presentations.
Right. So there's this word that we use a lot. It's called impact. And we often leave it there. Oh, if we have impact, then we reach our goal. The end game is impact. But that's a very broad word, impact. I sometimes have sandwiches that have an impact on me. So I want to define impact. So, and here's how I define impact. Impact, or when you nail your presentation or you nail, what you're writing, the person on the other end of the room, of the screen, of the book, of the page, they will either think anew or they will take a new action as a result of your communication. That is the effect I'm going for. Now, I don't want to leave it generalized like that. If we work for Coca-Cola, it would be, I want more people to buy Coca-Cola. If we're in animal welfare, then I want more people to play an active role in safeguarding the lives of vulnerable pets across the country. Now, how do we test that? Sometimes we think, oh, I'll go to my audience and I'll say, how did I do? Well, if you do that, they're going to be, you did great. All right. Well, what did you learn from that little exchange? So this is what you want to ask people as you're practicing, or even as you're showing your written document. You want to say, what point do you think I was trying to make? Or if you want to give them a little help, I wanted people to take away this one line. Did that come through? Did you, in fact, take that away? If their answer is yes, you win. If the answer is no, then you need to reimagine it or put more mustard on or more emphasis or, um, you know, uh, put more power behind the point that you're making to reinforce it.
Now, I have a question on that, Joel, because I just had this from a client the other day where they said, I'm never going to see or talk to the receiver. I kind of do this report. I say these changes should be made in this certain organization, and then I put it out. And I don't get contact with these people, and the changes that my research may invoke may be years down the line. So how do I know when I'm doing something right when I don't have that immediate feedback?
This is where you have the power of the point and why it's your best resource for helping you. If you know your point, which means you've done the research, you understand whether it happens in a year, in 5 year, in 10 years, you know how to articulate the outcome. And I'm glad you asked this, Elizabeth, because sometimes we fall short of articulating that outcome. I see a lot of presentations that say, if we do this right, we're going to get more traffic to our website. I just heard a radio commercial this morning that said, as a result of using this tool, the restaurant was able to have more people come to their website. Was that really the goal of the restaurant, to have more people come to the website? Often I see things that say, we'll be able to build more buildings, we'll be able to hire more staff, we'll have more money. None of those are the ultimate goal. You really need to think to yourself, is my goal helping us save more lives and curing cancer? Is my goal saving the world from uh, environmental disaster? Is my goal selling more Coca-Cola? Is my goal having people appreciate this celebrity? Whatever it is, think very hard about it and articulate that goal, not just a means to get to that goal. So to answer your question, Elizabeth, I think it's all about recognizing, and maybe with the help of other people through meetings, through surveys, having faith in articulating what that goal is. So whoever reads it, even if you don't get feedback, even if you don't get a return on that email, you have faith and you have confidence that that is what they need to do their job. Now, when I teach email training, one of the things I always say is try not to leave your email dead once you send it. Try to have an action step at the end. I'll follow up in a week. While you're doing that, I'm going to run this by legal. Can you get back to me or run this by your people by next Wednesday so we could take the next step? So that is one sort of tactical way in an email to keep that conversation alive.
I love that you have so many tools for folks to implement into their writing and presentations. And one of the things in your work that you warn writers and speakers about is avoiding split ends. Now, I don't think you have a background in hairstyling, so I'm guessing those aren't the kind of split ends we're talking.
It's not about shampoo,
Tell
exactly.
me tell me about split ends and why they can hurt a document or a presentation.
Sure, and this is really important because I see it all the time. Imagine I'm your CEO, and I wrote an email to you, or I put out a communication, or I'm giving a speech, and it sounds like this. We have a new campaign. It's going to make us more powerful, more effective, more efficient. We'll hire more people. We're going to get a higher profit. We'll be able to cut costs. More people will know our brand. They'll be able to connect with our brand. We're going to move more people. We're going to make people more aware of what we're doing. We're going to expand our resources and help other people sell our product. We're going to bring on more vendors, and we're going to have tons more partners who are going to be able to really help us. Thank you very much. Now, the speaker is thinking, well, this is like a Christmas tree. The more ornaments and benefits I hang on it, the more it's going to glow and people are going to love it.
And the listener is saying,
What?
Ah. And let's unpack that a little bit. When you're a listener or a reader, but it's harder on a listener. You know, when you read, you can stop, you can reread, you can wait, I'm going to think about this, I'm going to go back. When you're hearing a speech, none of that is true. But to a listener or a reader, when you get multiple ideas, here's what happens. They fight each other for your attention. And in doing so, they dilute the impact of each of those points. Because how many of you could repeat back to me everything that CEO said?
Something
And
about a
even if you
Christmas
had
tree?
yeah, and even if you had a photographic memory, which was the most important to that CEO, thus the most important to me, you wouldn't know that because I didn't indicate that. And I like to boil it down by saying this: if I tell you a lot of ideas, you will remember none of them. If I tell you some ideas, you will remember some of them. If I tell you one idea, you will remember all of them. So stick to one big idea because you know that's what your audience, what your readership is going to be able to digest, or at least one idea at a time. And that sounds like this. First, I'm going to talk about how this is going to affect our company. Then I'm going to talk about how this affects our audience and our customers. Then I'm going to look 5 years into our future. And if we do this right, how we're going to have more impact on our audience and help even more people as a result of what we did externally and internally. See how I delineated those 3 points and differentiated them? So that's what I mean by 1 point or 1 point at a time, because, we can all go back to seeing a presentation. And if you're not taking copious notes and they're not sending you the PowerPoint later, how much do you really remember? 5 things? And by 5 things, I mean 3. And by 3, I probably mean 1 or 2. It's your job as the presenter to make sure the one thing I take away is the right thing. It's because I'm probably saying a lot of things, and some of them are way less important than other things.
Yeah, Joel, I think that's so important because we see so many documents coming from engineering, from pharmaceuticals, from the tech world, where they won't break up the information. This is heavy, complicated information, and they don't put in those keywords like you mentioned. They don't put in the transitions. They don't break it up. And sometimes their templates don't break it up. And we're like,
Right.
let's try a section heading to kind of guide the reader as you were talking about. So I
Yeah. I
think,
work with a Oh, I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to break
oh,
your
no,
flow,
it's
but you
okay.
inspired me. I work with a lot of scientists and a lot of lawyers and a lot of subject matter expert SMEs. And here's the biggest problem that I've often seen. They tend to believe that if I describe all of this, my inventory, or if I describe this test or this process, then you can do the rest. You can figure out the
Oh,
value of it. And I want to tell us a quick story, if I can, that's really telling. I had a client who sold promotional items. She sold brochures and hats and pins. And I said, give me your best, make your point to me, pretend I'm a client. And she said, okay, you see this pin? This pin is a magnet, so there's no sharp end. It won't draw blood. It'll just go through your shirt, and I'll give you 3 colors on that, on your logo. And you see this brochure? This brochure, you can't crumple it, and even if it rains on it, it won't get wet. And you could put as many words as you want, front side, back side, and I'll give you a discount if you order 250 or more. You see this hat? An elephant could step on this hat. It will never crush. Your logo can go all the way around. I'll give you a discount on the third color of the logo." So she went through all that and she was done. And I said, "You're done?" She said, "I'm done." I described all of my content, all of my inventory in detail as a lawyer would or as a scientist would. And I said, "You did a good job of that. But you know what I never heard? I never heard you say that if I buy your product, I will be more successful."
Mhm.
And that was her point, but she never said it. She was too busy describing, giving a book report, sharing her inventory or her research or, her scientific facts or a bunch of facts. That's what I call giving a book report. It's sort of like in any book, you see a table of contents and you see blurbs on the back. You do not want to be the person delivering the table of contents. You want to be the blurber on the back because the table of contents describe only the blurb sells.
It's also very centered, what you change that to is centered on the audience. First of all, I love that she's led with, "This doesn't make you bleed." That's her selling point. I love that.
I kinda like an elephant could step on it and
Yeah, there's stuff in there. There's bits there, isn't there? She was very creative.
But to change it from, "Here's what I can do, here's what my stuff is," to, "Hey, audience, here's what you can do with this." I think that's an important framework that we have to shift our minds to. Not, "What can you do?" It's, "What can your audience do with your information?"
Right. It's all about what they want and need to know. And in advertising, if some of your audience have been there, it's this thought of features versus benefits. But something I always say is if you can identify what your audience wants and needs to know, then you can reverse engineer it. But let's be clear, a want is something they already know a little bit about, but they need more elaboration or proof. Or some of those Aristotelian tools.
wow.
Well, persuasion. I don't even think I pronounced that right. What they need, yeah. Well, let's buy it between the three of us. What they need to know versus what they want to know is something they know nothing about, but they need that information to make the best decision or take the best, most effective action that they can. What you'll find is if you know what they want and need to know, especially if it's an internal communication, time and time again, when I work with CEOs, they start by asking the wrong question. What do I want to say? What do I want to write today? What do I want to email my team? Wrong question. Because then you're not going to make a connection. You may uh, undistract them with a thought, but you're not going to connect to them so that they're, in fact, inspired and engaged and moved. So a CEO would need to find out whether it's through a survey, asking their people, finding out through lunch and learns with their staff, what do they want and need to know? And then, aha, let me connect with that by filling in that want with that extra detail and filling in that need to know by telling them and giving them the information they need to be more productive.
Let's talk for a second too about value propositions and the highest value proposition in a document or a presentation. Give us a little background on what you mean by that and where it should be in your document, in your presentation as you're communicating with your audience.
Right. I'll start with that last part first. Where it should be is everywhere. No one's going to come away, Sarah or Elizabeth, from your presentation saying, Sarah and Elizabeth were awesome, but they made their point too many times. That's because their point is your point, is the gift. It's the thing of value. But you need to make sure, like we addressed a little bit before, that that point is the ultimate value. So I worked for an organization that was about saving lives. But you know what I never heard in all the town hall presentations and internal presentations? That if we do this right, we're going to save more lives. I never heard that. What I heard instead was we'll build more traffic to our website. We'll be able to build more facilities. We'll have more employees. We'll be able to invest more in R&D and research and development. We'll be able to advance our L&D team. Uh, we'll be able to impress our shareholders. But at the end of the day, whether you work for a profit or a nonprofit, you should be able to connect the dots between what you're communicating and that ultimate impact, saving lives, selling more Coca-Cola, having people realize what the world is about and taking action to make sure we get to the right place. Whatever it is, work with your team to realize that highest value. Sometimes it will be in numbers. We want to reach 100,000, 10,000, a million, but sometimes not. So let's not get too caught into the trap that it needs to be expressed quantitatively. Sometimes it can be expressed qualitatively.
I think one aspect of presentations of writing, we've talked about that it needs to be tailored to the audience and have the impact, saying what is the impact to you, not just to me, but to you as well. Uh, I also want to talk about storytelling because I think storytelling, it's a trend. We always love the trends and we talk about the trends. But how do we do this and why do we use storytelling in documents and presentations? Why is it trending? What's so great about it?
Right. Let's unbury Aristotle for a section and talk about pathos. So, pathos is when you have an emotional connection. You're either showing or telling a story that makes us go, oh, or, that we want to do something. It's tapping into the emotional part of ourselves, not so much the intellectual argument. That's what storytelling does for us. And you're right, Elizabeth. You can read whole books on storytelling, and you can go to conferences about storytelling. The fact of the matter is, humans will accept something more easily through a story than through exposition, because we're used to stories. Why do we watch movies? Why do we watch cartoons or read anime or watch anime? Um, it's just it eases it in and lubricates the point getting through to us. So we can just period, paragraph break, leave that there. Storytelling is powerful. Here's the point I want people to understand about storytelling within a communication, a writing, or a speech. And it's this: the most important part of your story when you're making a point is not the story, it's the part where you say, this story is an illustration of why we must. This story proves why we should. This case study shows us the way toward our goal. Because ultimately, in a presentation, written or spoken, the story is a vehicle through which your point travels. You're not telling that story to entertain. You want them to understand it as relevant, not just riveting, because you're not a comedian who I just want to get a laugh, or I just want to distract you, or I just want to warm you up. No, I'm telling the story because Aristotle taught me it's a great tool to make my point, not just to tell a story. Because all too often I see someone say, like the story I just told about the client I had who created all these promotional materials. So you see that she ended with a description of all of her products. But I fail as a presenter if I don't say she never made her point, which was this: if I buy her products, I will be more successful. What do I want the audience to learn and take away from that story? It's my job as the presenter, as the communicator, to articulate it, to put mustard on it, to emphasize it, to draw a circle on it, to put it in neon. There was the story, and I know you got that. But here's the point that I was trying to make with that story. And if you watch a TED talk, very often they do this well. They know to tell stories. It's drilled into their heads. You see it all the time. This happened to me. What I learned from that and how I benefited from that was by, and today I'm a much more X person as a result of that learning experience. So make sure to say those words. This illustrates why we should, why we must, what happens when we do. If you do that, then you're doing the much more important job of making the point versus the slightly lesser job of just telling a story.
And I have two questions. Oh, go ahead, Sarah. I'll do my two questions after that.
I was just gonna say that humans love stories. I mean, even at night, we're telling ourselves stories as we dream, and really using story to engage your audience and help them understand your point is a pretty powerful tool.
Yeah,
Elizabeth?
especially at the beginning of your speech. The speeches we remember often start with a story about a client, a friend, ourselves. Now, sometimes we think those stories have to be super dramatic. I needed to save this busload of orphans and from going into the river, and here's how I did it. No, It could be something very simple. Even if you tell a story of you're driving to the conference that morning and you were listening to NPR and you heard this thing, or your 6-year-old said something to you that made you go, hmm. Everybody has a story to tell. So don't think it has to be very dramatic. The power of the story is not in the details. The power of the story is in the humanness of it. And so people can relate to it. That's much more important than them being impressed by it.
Mm. Now, I have to ask because we had
Please.
a guest use mustard as well, but it was in a different context. What do you mean by mustard, Joel?
Now, keep in mind, I'm from New York and I might be a little hungry. I haven't had lunch yet. So it's really about sharpening your message and putting emphasis on it so that your audience has the best chance of receiving it. When I used to write quotes for press releases for leadership, I needed to put mustard on it so that it served its goal, not for some looking at it and being like, that's a great quote, but so the magazine or newspaper would use that quote in their article. So when I talk about reinforcing something or putting mustard on it, I mean of picking the right words, putting them in the right order, elevating the opportunity for that quote to get picked. And sometimes it's about the words we use or don't use. For example, I wrote this article about verb swaps. And when we say something lesser, when we mean something more, one of them is we often say, if we do this right, we're going to allow this to happen. What does allow mean? It means we're going to step aside and it was going to happen anyway. We just sort of like let it happen. We didn't take any action about it. It's not like we were an agent that made that happen. No, but we were. So instead of we allowed it, we enabled it. And in my work, I'm constantly replacing allow with enable. I'm also replacing avoid, which is passive, with prevent, which means I did something to prevent it, not just avoid it. Often we say we want to address a problem. What does it mean to address a problem? We're going to think about it. We're going to have a meeting about it. We're going to address it. But if we overcame a problem, that's a much bigger deal. So whether it's any of these things, even respond versus react, when we react to something, we have an emotional reaction. Oh my gosh, I'm angry. When we respond to it, we thought about it, and we're saying, here's my intellectual response. Here's the next step we need to take. So even on that word by word level, we can put more mustard on things, we can put more emphasis on things so that they're received with more impact.
I like that. I'm gonna start using that. Can I say Dijon mustard and just instead of mustard?
Yes, please. You know,
Okay. And I'll be sure to give you credit. I love that.
mayonnaise, adjust to your taste, please.
Does this concept connect with your concept of adjectives at all?
It does, because just as there are ways to include things that have more impact, it's very important to exclude things that have no impact that we think do. I mean, how many times have you said or heard a presentation or something you've read that says, this idea is great. This is a very good concept. This is going to be awesome for us.
I
This is
feel
going to be
attacked,
super.
Joel. I feel personally attacked.
Present company excluded.
Put some mustard on it.
On a learning journey. Yeah, well, let's go back to the Mustang. I call these badjectives because they're adjectives that are so broad that they're almost meaningless. Let's go back to my tuna fish sandwich, I think I said earlier. If I can apply the same awesome, great, very good to the tuna sandwich I had yesterday as I can to this amazing campaign that's going to be a game changer for our company, then there must be something wrong with that adjective. It must be too broad. So, how do we solve this problem of badjectives? Simple. We ask why. Why will this solution make us more effective? I understand it's great. Well, this campaign will be great because it'll allow us to expand the audience for our product. All right, so now we have this campaign is great because it will enable us to expand the audience for our product. So that's pretty good. But you know what? Now we don't even need that adjective. Great. We went from A to B to C. Let's get rid of it. So let's go from this campaign is great because it expands our audience to this campaign expands our audience. Now we play the less is more game, which is good. And we get further to our point using fewer words. Remember, the more words we throw at an audience, the more distracted they will get, and the more they'll have to dig around to find our true point. So let's cut words to make sure that it's easiest for them to not only hear our point and read it, but truly digest it.
I'm hearing you really focus on solutions. And throughout this whole episode, I've heard you focus on solutions rather than challenges. And I think that can be very different for our listeners, where aren't we supposed to show what the problem is? Why would we emphasize solutions over challenges?
Right. Just recently, I was supporting an op-ed opportunity, which was about the challenges facing people with disabilities. And the first two-thirds of the op-ed were about the challenges they face, whether they're social, financial, psychological, real, tangible, intangible. It went on and on because the person was making this case of how big the challenges were. And at the very end, it said, here's how we can solve this problem. Here's how we are investing in community efforts to solve this problem. Well, the fact of the matter is when people read anything, nonfiction or an op-ed, they will put the most emphasis to the beginning and then the middle. Some of them maybe even never make it to the end. So what point did they pull away? There are a lot of obstacles in front of people with disabilities. Oh, well, I kind of knew that. Thank you very much. I could Google that. So they never get to that point. But even if they do get to the point of how we solve this problem, it's way at the bottom. We spend 90% of the time describing a challenge. Now, I'm not saying don't describe the challenge, but let's flip it as much as we can so that we're inserting the solution into it. So this problem is a huge challenge for people with disabilities, but there is a solution involving legislation and community engagement that will help. For example, the social challenge facing people with disabilities is hard because of XYZ. But if we do this, that'll change it. Secondly, the psychological issues are involved are this, but if we address it this way with psychological communities and social service, we will do this. So what I'm in effect doing is I'm putting in the challenge, but I'm making a layer cake instead of the cake and then the icing at the bottom. I'm raising all of my solutions up so that I'm going instead of challenge, 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 solution, I'm going challenge, solution, challenge, solution, challenge, solution. And I'm making sure my lead includes and emphasizes no more mustard for us, emphasizes the solution versus just the challenge. Because at the get go, I want people to realize that my argument is about solving this problem, not just describing this problem.
I love that. You've given us so much to think about, and I'm I'm mentally making notes for even some things, some documents I need to write later today. So thank you in advance. And I'm sure our listeners are too. But let me ask you some big picture questions. In particular, with all the experience you've had and all of the advice and information you have for us, what is your number one rule for clear communication?
Usually people take this opportunity to find something new. I'm going to use this as a learning moment. In media training, they'll often say, "All right, what's one final thing you want to share?" And the person, the mouthpiece or the representative of the company will think, "All right, what's the eighth most important thing that I didn't say so far?" And that's the wrong thing because this is a good opportunity to re-say the first thing because that's what you really want people to realize. So to answer your question, Sarah, I'm going to go back to the number one thing, which is know your point. If you do not have a true point, use the I believe that test, use the XY test, then you will end up pointless no matter what happens after that. You're sharpening nothing. You're championing a thought, a notion, an observation, a definition, but not a true point. So make sure you start with a true point. It'll not only benefit you, it'll help you with everything to come after. Now I know what I'm here for, what I'm here to champion, what I'm here to prove, what I'm here to make sure you receive, you digest, and you make use of after I'm done.
Wow. That's a brilliant way to wrap things up. And actually, it's a brilliant transition into the next part of our show. So thank you for that as well.
Snap.
where,
Pleasure.
where we ask you, the guest, three questions. And these three questions are asked of all our guests. So
All right.
let me ask, are you ready for this impactful moment? Not to use the
I'm ready. I
okay.
prepare myself.
One
All right, I'm good to go.
The first question is, what is one thing that you wish you'd been taught about writing that would have made your professional life a whole lot easier?
I think that someone should have told me to delete the first paragraph of almost everything you write earlier in life. I can't tell you. It seems draconian what they call about killing your I forget what it is.
Oh,
There
killing your
is love
darlings.
yeah, killing your dogs. There are things you love about your writing, but what does that have to do with, the impact on your audience? And 7.5 times out of 10, when I've gone back and eliminated my entire first paragraph,
Mm.
it got to the point sooner, it was cleaner, it was quicker, it did its job, even if I had to kill some of my darlings. So that's a very specific piece of advice. Try it. Now you may find, all right, well, at least I reduced that first paragraph to one sentence and I got into it quicker. But I think it's very, very beneficial.
Second question, a writing rule or habit that we hear a lot about that doesn't actually serve you well in your actual writing. So something like never end a sentence in a proposition, never split an infinitive. Break it down for us. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I see this on Twitter a lot because I'm connected to a lot of writers. And often they talk about grammar as something that's a bother to them. I'm a grammarian. I love good grammar. But if you want to break the rules of grammar, I start a lot of sentences with and or but. Those may break the rules of grammar. But here's my thing, you need to understand the rules of grammar first before you break them. Don't break them out of ignorance. I know why I need to begin with and or but. I know why I don't use a semicolon, even if I want to, even if it's useful to me. I know why I am putting in the extra comma. I'm very pro what's that called again?
The
You're gonna have
extra comma, Joel, it is the
Oxford.
only
the
way.
Oxford comma, the
That's
Oxford
the
comma. It's
only way. I feel very strongly about this.
there's
Elizabeth is
another
going to
word
have a
for it also,
moment
I
here.
forget. I'm very pro Oxford, comma. I'm very against
I
not using it.
I am right there with you. I'm a recent convert, but I am also right there with you.
Let's all agree with that. Now in the public speaking space, I often find that a lot of, advice is useless. Um, Imagining or having a vision of success. At least it doesn't work for me. I visualize success, I get up, I'm still as nervous. That didn't help me at all. Or imagining people in their underwear, that's an oldie but goodie. Something people put a lot of focus on is vocal variation. I'm gonna go up on this word, down on that word, do this with this word. That's all too prescriptive. I have some speakers who are like, here's gesture one, gesture two, gesture three. I'm like, no, 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 no. Authenticity. The object is never perfection. In fact, I'm glad we came to this point because I have a lot of public speakers and they say, what's your goal? My goal is to sound like Michelle Obama. My goal is to sound like Steve Jobs. That's not your goal
Mhm.
because they're them. And guess what? If they tried to give your presentation, they wouldn't be able to. Your goal is to make your point and
Mhm.
stop seeing it like it's you're going to get an award for perfection. You're going to get a trophy for being the best speaker at the keynote. No, it's none of that. You are like a bicycle delivery person. It's your job to move your point from here, your head, to their heads. And the beauty of thinking like that, thinking of it as a blue collar job, I got to move this thing, uh, is it lessens our fear and our glossophobia, which is a fear of public speaking, because we see it as less about, "Oh my gosh, am I gonna embarrass myself? Are my teeth white enough? Did I pick the wrong shirt today?" Because none of that matters. All that matters is that you move that point. At the end of the day, if you were imperfect and you delivered that point imperfectly, but you still delivered it, you win. But if Elizabeth gives a presentation and they come away thinking, "Boy, Elizabeth was fantastic. She was great. She was so funny. She was smart. She was interesting. She had the best microphone." Yeah, but what did, Elizabeth what was her point that day? What did you learn from her? Um, I don't really remember, maybe I wrote it down, but boy, was she awesome. Now that doesn't help Elizabeth unless she wants to get more public speaking gigs, which she may or may not. But usually, especially in podcasting, you want people to take away a strong point. So that would be a fail. So let's lower the sense of, because people aren't afraid of public speaking. They're afraid of shame. Am I going to embarrass myself? We're not born with a fear of public speaking. So how do we work against that? We make it not about this, but about this, your point. Just move that point like a delivery person, even if imperfectly, and you've succeeded.
I absolutely love that. I am taking so much away from today's conversation, and I almost hate to ask a third question because that means we're moving on to the closing part of our podcast. But here, nonetheless, is the third question. What is one thing you wish people knew about writing, specifically writing in the corporate world? And if you want to expand that to presenting, communication, that sort of thing, go for it. But what's that one thing you wish people knew?
You know, I would say 2 things. One is, do not start with, "What do I wanna say? What do I wanna write? What do I want to express?" Start with what your audience wants and needs to know, and what you know about that, and put it in the form of a point. But to give another idea I see often, we know that less is more. All of us writers, or, people who want to write, understand that concept, and maybe that means cut. Uh, but what we need to know also, not only is less more, but more is less. Meaning that the more we put into that statement, that sentence, that phrase, the less our audience is going to be able to digest it. Remember, when you write something, you know it backwards and forwards. Just like when you give a speech, you practiced it, you've run it by people, you're an expert in it. What about your audience? They're hearing it for the very first time. All you need to do is say it or write it. What do they need to do? I need to hear it, listen to it, digest it, think about it. Is this relevant to my work? Should I send this to my boss? Should I put this into my program? Should I write this down? Should I tweet this? Now, meanwhile, while all that cognitive stuff is happening, the speaker is 7 sentences down the road. So, and some of that stuff is really important. And that's why pausing, by the way, is so important in public speaking, because that gives your audience the time to do all that cognitive work, to think, to digest, to apply, to find relevance. But to answer your point, let's just not think in terms of less is more. Let's understand that more is less. And let's not even think about so much cutting. Oh, I need to cut words. All right. So it's 24 words. I need 18. Let's think, my point is in here, but it's a little buried. How do I unbury it? How do I put mustard on it so that it rises to the surface? What words, yes, can I cut, but not for the sake of just cutting words, but for the sake of emphasizing and boiling down the true valuable point I want to express.
That's great, and I love that you got mustard in there. I love it. This is just like the mustard season for some reason.
I had them throw me
Yeah.
for lunch though. I didn't
Writing on you. Fast brought to you by Mustard. Yes.
CWDs is a new sponsor.
Joel, we also have a segment called Doctor's Diagnosis, where listeners and clients submit their writing and communication problems, and we write prescriptions for them to fix their ailments. So here's our listener's communication problem. I work as a mining engineer, and my boss is pushing me to give more presentations on our proposals to potential clients. I've avoided doing this because I truly hate giving presentations. I always have. I get nervous and my throat closes up as I talk, and then I have trouble making any sounds, and it's embarrassing. I've tried explaining this to my boss, but he's made it clear that I need to do more presentations if I want to keep my job. I don't want to lose my job, but I don't know what to do. Help, please.
Happy to help. And by the way, I wrote a piece for Fast Company. Our Vice President Kamala Harris, there are 2 occasions where she was on video helping a public speaker. One was to a group of young women who asked her for advice on speech making. Another was a setting not unlike what you described, where she was at an event where some guy who was not a public speaker by any stretch, was very nervous, almost broke down. And she went to him and she told him something I would share with this client, which is, don't think of yourself as a public speaker. Again, don't think of yourself as doing something where everybody is assessing you. Like you're going to get a medal if you do this right. Your boss is going to love you. Just think of yourself as having something valuable here. And all your audience wants from you is to come out here. That's it. That's the ball game. That's all you need to realize. And that will help bring down that fear. Number 2 is understand your point, because if you don't have a point, you should be nervous because you don't know what you want to present. And some people think you're born with that ability, but years ago, I won't say where I worked, but there was a senior vice president who gave just address about this is where we are this quarter. It was excruciating because he went on and on. He had a note, like notes by his side. He never referred to them. He just kind of went on and on. There was no point. We took nothing away. We were held hostage, and some of you have been there before, and it was pretty horrible. And the result is not only did I get nothing from it, but I was angry. I could have done a lot of stuff with that time rather than being held hostage there. But anyway, so that's number 2. Know your point. Number 3 is something that you can Google. If you say before a presentation, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited. You will come across excited. That nervous energy will toggle into excitement because somewhere in your brain, and the neuroscientists among you are, you're gonna say I'm gonna mess this up, but basically, as I understand it, the place where you're nervous, that registers nervousness, and the place that registers excitement are so close that you can dupe yourself into being excited with your nervous energy. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying you actually are excited. You're still nervous, but saying those words out loud or even in your head, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, will jump you from that nervous energy to your excited energy. Now, you can Google that for hardcore research was done on that brain science. So it was fascinating. So that's why I have to bring it up. So, number 1, know what you have to do. You know something they don't, you just have to get it out your mouth. 2, put it in the form of a point so you know the argument you're making, you know what you want them to receive. And 3, say, I'm excited, I'm excited, I'm excited, and you will come out excited, which is a wonderful quality for a presenter to have, to be excited about what they're saying.
Joel, you've given us so much information today. This has been absolutely incredible. Our listeners, I know, are having lots of things they can take away from this conversation, but how can they get in touch with you and learn even more about what you do?
Sure. Well, the IT people love when I say this. I consider my work open code. I like to share it. We're not competing with each other as presenters and as public speakers or as writers. There's plenty of room, plenty of places to publish our writing, to get our writing out there. So we're not competing like kids trying to get into college. So for that reason, I love to share as much as I can. So if people go to www.joelschwartzberg.net, and I apologize, blame my parents, that my name is so long, but joelschwartzberg.net, or you can just Google me and you'll pretty much find it. I'm very Googleable. And you click on articles, you'll get to all the articles I've written for Toastmaster Magazine, for Harvard Business Review, for Fast Company, for Inc.com, and you could see clearly what the skill sets are. So, for example, if you speak quickly, you'll be able to easily find the article on speaking quickly. It's also where my books are, where my podcasts are, where my testimonials from my training and public speaking experiences and adventures are, and finally, where my books are. Get to the point in the language of leadership, which is really I wrote those books to be the best capsulization of all these ideas in a place where you can find them all in one place.
Terrific. Joel, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great having you on the show. We loved it. We loved the mustard.
We do. Thank you, and the comma, the Oxford comma, the Oxford comma. Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Sarah. This was fun, and I wish your audience the best of writing success.
Make sure to check out Get to the Point, Sharpen Your Message, and Make Your Words Matter, and The Language of Leadership, How to Engage and Inspire Your Team, both of which are available on Amazon as hard copy or on Kindle. Also, check out Joel's website at joelschwartzberg.net. This is Hurley Writes Writing Docs signing off. May your week be filled with good health and good writing.